Welcome back to Beautiful Disasters. I'm so glad to welcome you back to the channel as we explore stories that started with great moments but quickly spiraled down. Before we get into today's topic, I would like to ask that you subscribe to the channel so that you can keep up with all my updates. Now let's get into today's story. The Osage Murders. Part 2. For Molly and her family. Life takes a chaotic turn. The immense grief and trauma they have to endure are further complicated by the fact that the Osage people are both despised and envied in their community due to their immense wealth. Years of forced assimilation and the sudden influx of riches have distanced them from their tribal customs and simpler way of life. Many Osage individuals find themselves overwhelmed by these changes and yearn for the simplicity they once knew. In the midst of this turmoil, Molly and her family fear that justice for Anna will never be served. However, a glimmer of hope emerges in the form of William K. Hale, known as the King of the Osage Hills. He promises to ensure that justice is served. Molly and her family see Hale's benevolence as a blessing and are grateful for his wealth, power, and influence during this trying time. Although everyone in Molly's family appears to offer their assistance in the investigation, officials suspect that Anna's killer came from outside the reservation. Osage County is plagued by organized crime and lawlessness, as the allure of striking it rich in the oil industry has attracted all sorts of criminals from across the nation. Outlaws and fugitives seek refuge in the treacherous Osage Hills, including the notorious Blackie Thompson and the infamous Al Spencer, leader of a gang of outlaws. The situation on the Osage Reservation becomes increasingly complex and dangerous as the search for justice intensifies. It is more terrifying to think that someone close to Molly and her family could be responsible for the brutal violence rather than an outsider infiltrating the reservation. After several weeks since Anna's funeral, Freya receives a letter from a man who has been arrested in Kansas for check forgery. Shockingly, the letter claims that Brown paid him $8,000 to murder Anna and provides disturbing details about the crime. Brown is swiftly apprehended by a group of lawmen, but their investigation quickly disproves the allegations made in the forger's letter, leading to Brown's release. Hale, who has strong connections with the county prosecutor and played a significant role in his election, consults with him and other local officials regarding Anna's murder. In a desperate attempt to find the bullet, the county prosecutor obtains an order to exhume Anna's body. But despite digging up her grave and even having the Schoen brothers search for the bullet by cutting up Anna's head with a meat cleaver, they find nothing. In July of 1921, the justice of the peace concluded his inquiries and deemed Anna's death a perplexing enigma, just like he did with Whitehorn's case. Meanwhile, Lizzie's health deteriorated rapidly despite Molly's efforts to seek assistance from Osage medicine men. Sadly, Lizzie passed away in July, merely 2 months after Anna's tragic murder. But Smith, Molly's brother-in-law, a formidable and determined man, expressed his profound frustration with the authorities' investigation. He couldn't help but wonder if there was something peculiar about Lizzie's demise. Taking matters into his own hands, Bill embarked on a personal quest and gradually became convinced that Lizzie had been poisoned. He firmly believed that all three deaths, Lizzie's, Anna's, and Whitehorn's, were intricately linked to the Osage tribe's hidden reserves of valuable oil beneath the surface. Molly's introduction to the oil discovery happened when she was just 10 years old. However, the complex history of the Osage people and their oil-rich land dates back centuries. In the 17th century, the Osage claimed a significant portion of the central United States, stretching from present-day Missouri and Kansas to Oklahoma, and even as far west as the Rockies. Unfortunately, in 1803, Thomas Jefferson acquired these lands through the Louisiana Purchase, which were predominantly occupied by the Osage. Jefferson then met with the Osage chiefs in 1804, coercing them to relinquish much of their territories under the threat of being labeled enemies of the United States if they refused. Consequently, the Osage were compelled to surrender nearly 100 million acres of their ancestral land and were forced to relocate to a 50 by 125-mile area in southeastern Kansas. Molly's parents grew up in this place during the mid-1840s, deeply rooted in tribal traditions and resistant to adopting the ways of the white settlers. Despite being promised that the Kansas Territory would be theirs forever, the Osage once again faced encroachment by settlers. In 1870, they were forced to sell off their land for a mere $1.25 per. The settlers' impatience led to brutal acts of mutilation and massacre against the Osage, prompting the Indian Affairs agent to question who the true savages were. Seeking a more secure future, the Osage purchased 1.5 million acres in the hilly region south of Kansas. They established their largest settlement in Pawhuska, where Lizzie and her husband, known by his Osage name Nukaisi, settled in 1874. Out of this time, the tribe's population had significantly declined, and the American buffalo, vital to the Osage for sustenance and resources, had been nearly wiped out due to a deliberate campaign by settlers who understood that every buffalo dead is an Indian. As the settlers pushed for assimilation and indoctrination of the Osage tribe, Molly's parents fought to preserve their customs. In the 1880s, when Molly and her sisters were born, they were given traditional Osage names. However, the settlers in Pawhuska, Gray Horse, and the surrounding areas refused to acknowledge these names. Eventually, Molly's entire family adopted English names. In 1894, Molly and her sisters were enrolled in a Catholic school, which was a 2-day journey from their home. Their parents were concerned that if they didn't comply with the government's orders to send their children to such schools, their annuity payments for the Kansas land would be withheld. At school, Molly was forced to abandon her traditional tribal clothing, including her Indian blanket, and wear a plain frock. She was also prohibited from speaking Osage and had to learn English as part of her education, which aimed to mold her into the authorities' idea of an ideal woman. Molly reluctantly embraced her training in the domestic arts, and over time, she and her fellow students shed their traditional clothing and customs in favor of assimilated white attire and behaviors. By the late 1890s, the government's assimilation campaign was still ongoing. The Osage Reservation was on the verge of being divided into 160-acre parcels, with each tribal member receiving one allotment, while the remaining territory would be open to settlers. The Osage were aware, based on the division and allotment of Cherokee land nearby, that this could lead to dangerous circumstances. In September 1893, when the Cherokee land was divided, a chaotic and violent land rush ensued as tens of thousands of white settlers arrived to claim their parcels of land. James Bigheart, the esteemed Osage chief, dedicated himself tirelessly to thwarting the process of allotment. However, by 1904, the government had set its sights on dividing Indian territory and incorporating it into the new state of Oklahoma. The Osage, determined to safeguard their land, managed to persuade the government to allocate larger parcels of land to each tribal member. This ingenious move reduced the likelihood of a chaotic scramble for their territory. Additionally, they cunningly slipped in a seemingly peculiar provision: the reservation of oil, gas, coal, and other minerals beneath their land exclusively for the Osage themselves. The tribe possessed knowledge of oil deposits within their reservation and sought to protect their interests. Through the terms of their Allotment Act, every member of the Osage tribe received a head right, granting them a share in the tribe's mineral trust. So when Oklahoma joined the Union, tribal members could sell their surface land and profit from it while retaining ownership of the mineral trust. These head rights were not available for purchase or sale. They could only be inherited. In due course, the tribe began leasing sections of their land to white prospectors for exploration. Among those who ventured there in search of oil was a young Jean Paul Getty, who would later establish the renowned Getty Oil Company. In the spring of 1917, a momentous day arrived when a drilling rig struck a substantial deposit, causing oil to erupt from the earth in a magnificent dark column. In 1920, Burbank, one of the most productive oil fields in the nation, had been tapped, with its initial well yielding an impressive 680 barrels within its first 24 hours of operation. In Osage County, the apathetic investigators have failed to properly investigate Lizzie's suspicious death, as well as the murders of Anna Brown and Charles Whitehorn. Frustrated by the lack of progress, both families resort to the only option available to them: money. Molly offers a cash reward of $2,000 for any information that leads to the arrest of those responsible for Anna's death. While the Whitehorn family offers $2,500, William Hale also promises his own reward. So when Sheriff Reeves is accused of deliberately neglecting his duty to enforce the law, Hale decides to take matters into his own hands. He hires a private investigator to uncover the truth. The white neighbors of the Osages, despite the prevalent racism, prejudice, and corruption in town, show interest in the case and offer their assistance to the Burkhart and Whitehorn families. Yet, even their help raises suspicions. During the summer of 1921, the investigators hired by Mathis arrive in Osage County. They diligently question Anna's servants and Brian Burkhart, while also delving into Anna's phone records from the night she disappeared. One of the investigators becomes particularly suspicious of Oda Brown. However, when they attempt to locate him throughout Oklahoma, they encounter difficulties in tracking him down. Finally, one investigator manages to find Brown and engages him in conversation without revealing his true identity as a private eye. To their surprise, Brown confesses that he was involved in a relationship with another woman and was not even present in the area at the time of Anna's death. This revelation adds another layer of complexity to the investigation, leaving the investigators with more questions than answers. In the depths of Osage County, a woman by the name of Rose Osage confesses to the murder of Anna. Apparently, Anna had attempted to seduce Rose's boyfriend, Joe Allen. The investigators diligently pursue this lead, but unfortunately, they are unable to find any evidence to support Rose's claim. It may suspect that she may be fabricating the story in hopes of receiving a reward. Sheriff Reeves, however, advises the private detectives to look into two suspicious individuals from the oil camps. These characters are known for their tough demeanor and questionable activities. In the midst of their investigation, the private detectives share their findings with Bill Smith, who happens to be married to Rita, Molly's sister. Interestingly, Bill is conducting his own investigation into the matter. Prior to becoming involved with the Osage fortune, Bill had a shady past as a horse thief. He was initially married to Minnie, Molly's sister, but after her unfortunate demise in 1918 due to an illness, he remarried Rita. Molly has always harbored suspicions about Bill, believing that he may have played a role in Minnie's death. Even Hale, one of the investigators, does not trust Bill and suspects that he is using his marriages to Osage women for financial gain. In an attempt to gather more information about Anna's death, Bill takes a private detective to speak with the tailor who supposedly possesses some knowledge about the incident. However, the tailor continues to spread rumors about Rose. The private detectives resort to installing a listening device to eavesdrop on Rose and her boyfriend, but unfortunately, they do not hear anything incriminating or useful. Meanwhile, another crucial piece of information comes to light. It is discovered that Anna had confided in several individuals about her pregnancy before her untimely demise. However, no one knows who the father of the child is. O.W. Comstock, a local attorney and guardian of several Osage Indians' fortunes, offers his assistance to the investigation. Given his extensive connections within the Osage community, the private eyes accept his offer. Comstock reveals that there has been talk about Hattie, the widow of Whitehorn, coveting her late husband's wealth and being jealous of his relationship with another woman. This leads the investigators to wonder if Whitehorn could have been the father of Anna's child. They begin tailing Hattie, but unfortunately, they do not come across any significant developments. One day, A.W. Comstock, a local attorney and guardian of several Osage Indians' fortunes, offers his assistance to the investigation. The private eyes accept his offer due to his numerous contacts among the Osage. Comstock shares that he has heard rumors about Whitehorn's widow Hattie being jealous of her husband's relationship with another woman and coveting his money. Investigators begin tailing Hattie, suspecting that Whitehorn could have been the father of Anna's child, but they encounter no new developments. As the danger on the reservation continues to increase and more Osage Indians are murdered, it becomes clear that the authorities cannot be trusted. The investigations seem to come to an unsatisfying halt, and a new string of poisonings suggests that Lizzie had indeed been poisoned earlier. In August of 1922, the tribe begs Barney McBride, a wealthy white woman and trusted ally of the Osage, to go to Washington, D.C. and plead with the federal authorities to investigate. I'm here after receiving a warning telegram and being kidnapped. McBride's body is found stripped naked and stabbed upwards of 20 times. Finally, the truth is out. The events unfolding on the Osage reservation are nothing short of a calculated, premeditated conspiracy. The fact that people are calling for action against the tribe's increasing wealth only highlights the lack of concern for their wealth. It's clear that many across the country harbor a will towards the rich Redskins. The media's portrayal of the Osage tribe as villains only adds fuel to the fire, making it less likely that anyone with the power to stop the murders will take notice. This is yet another example of the pervasive racism that Native Americans face in society. So despite the fact that there are white Americans who flaunt their wealth in more reckless and dangerous ways, the Osage are singled out for their luxurious lifestyles because it upsets the social order that white America has established. The U.S. government's discriminatory policies prevent full-blooded tribe members from managing their own finances, effectively keeping Native Americans at the bottom of the social hierarchy. In 1921, the government enforces even more severe laws and decides that even Osages with guardians will be limited to withdrawing only a few $1,000s annually from their trust funds. Unfortunately, the tribe faces more financial interference from local merchants who overcharge them and from unscrupulous accountants and lawyers who seek to exploit their bank accounts. Finally, being a full-blooded Osage is required to have a guardian oversee her finances, and she chooses her husband Ernest to ensure that her family has some control over their funds. During a congressional hearing, an Osage chief named Bacon Rye expresses his frustration that white America has pushed the Osage people to the roughest part of the country, and now that the land is valuable, everyone wants a piece of the money. In the chilly month of February in 1923, two men venture out on a hunting expedition just north of Fairfax. As they traverse the rugged terrain, their eyes catch sight of a car nestled at the base of a rocky hill. Intrigued, they make their way back to Fairfax to alert the authorities of their peculiar find. Soon enough, a deputy sheriff and the town marshal embark on a journey to investigate the mysterious car. Approaching cautiously, they peer inside and are met with the chilling sight: a man slumped over the steering wheel, drenched in blood, with a fatal gunshot wound to the back of his head. This grim discovery shatters any hope that the brutal slaying of Barney McBride, which occurred 6 months prior, was an isolated incident. The latest victim is identified as Henry Roan, a 40-year-old Osage Indian who leaves behind a wife and 2 children. The freezing temperatures have preserved his body, making identification a straightforward task. The lawmen make their way back to town, urgently notifying the justice of the peace and seeking out Hale, Roan's closest confidant. Roan trusted Hale implicitly, considering him his best friend. Due to the unjust guardianship legislation that restricted Roan's access to his own finances, Hale often lent him money. In fact, their financial ties were so intertwined that Roan had designated Hale as the beneficiary of his $25,000 life insurance policy, a decision prompted by the discovery of his wife's affair with another man. The web of intrigue surrounding these murders continues to unravel, leaving the lawmen and the town in a state of unease. The hunt for the truth intensifies as they realize that the killing spree shows no signs of abating. The deputy and the marshal, accompanied by Hale and the Shelm brothers, return to the location of the crime, which happens to be the same ravine where Anna was tragically murdered. They initiate a coroner's inquest and make a significant discovery. It is determined that Roan was actually murdered approximately 10 days prior, and they find evidence of another vehicle's tread marks in the frozen mud. On Roan's person, they find $20 in cash and a valuable gold watch. Word of Roan's death spreads throughout the town, and Molly is deeply shaken by the news. In 1902, long before she met Ernest, Molly and Roan had a brief and secret marriage, likely arranged in the traditional Osage manner. As the authorities begin investigating Roan's death after his funeral, Molly becomes increasingly anxious, fearing that her first marriage will be exposed and enrage her second husband, Ernest, who is naturally possessive and jealous. The Osage community is acutely aware that they are being targeted due to their valuable hedge rights. Fear and unease permeate every moment, causing restlessness and turmoil within the community. Molly's family is not immune to the growing paranoia. Rita and her husband, Bill Smith, after hearing suspicious commotion outside their home in the middle of the night, decide to move into an elegant two-story house in the heart of Fairfax. Shortly after the move, in early March, dogs in the neighborhood start dying, leading Bill to believe that the watchdogs are being deliberately poisoned. He confides in a friend, expressing his belief that his own life may be in danger. On March 9th, Bill and his companion embark on a journey to the notorious bootleg Henry Grammer's ranch. Bill, in desperate need of a drink, convinces his friend to accompany him. Grammer, a mysterious figure who holds control over an unseen world, is known for his illegal activities. Both Roan and Anna had obtained whiskey from Grammer's ranch before, making it a popular destination. Grammer's influence extends to an army of bandits, including the likes of Asa Kirby and John Ramsey. Upon reaching the ranch, Bill and his friend discover that Grammer is absent. Nevertheless, Bill decides to purchase some whiskey. They then make their way back to Fairfax, where Bill drops off his friend and heads home to Rita. As the clock strikes 3 in the morning, a deafening explosion rocks the area, reaching the ears of neighbors and witnesses far and wide. Even Molly and Ernest, tucked in their beds, feel the tremor. Ernest, hastily putting on his slippers and pajamas, rushes outside to investigate the source of the chaos. To his horror, he finds Bill and Rita's house reduced to nothing but ash. With the arrival of dawn, the justice of the peace, Mathis, and the Shelm brothers join the Smiths' neighbors in a search for survivors. Miraculously, Bill is discovered alive, although his legs are unrecognizably seared and the rest of his body is covered in horrific burns. Tragically, Rita's lifeless body is also found amidst the wreckage. However, the explosion has obliterated their white servant, Nettie, leaving behind only fragments of her remains. The doctors waste no time in loading Bill into an ambulance, administering morphine to alleviate his pain. But he can be properly questioned. Bill loses consciousness. When he finally regains consciousness, his responses are incoherent and disjointed. 4 days after the bombing, Bill succumbs to his injuries and tragically passes away. The news of the attack sent shockwaves of sadness, pain, and outrage throughout Fairfax and beyond. In a bid to restore faith in the justice system, the governor of Oklahoma took decisive action in April 1923. He dispatched his most trusted state investigator to Osage County, where the community had grown suspicious of local officials' involvement in the crimes. The hope was that an outsider could uncover the truth and expose the corruption that had tainted the investigation. However, the initial optimism quickly turned to disappointment. Within days of his arrival, the investigator was caught accepting bribes from notorious local criminals. The revelation shattered any remaining trust the Osage people had in the justice system. In June, the investigator was removed from the case and sent to prison, leaving the community feeling betrayed and abandoned. Meanwhile, in Perhauska, W.W. Vaughan, an attorney deeply involved in the murder investigations, received distressing news. A close friend informed him that George Bighart, the nephew of James Bighart, had fallen victim to a suspected poisoning and was rushed to an Oklahoma City hospital. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Vaughan shared crucial information with his wife, instructing her to hand it over to the authorities if anything were to happen. Upon reaching the hospital, Vaughan had a private conversation with Bighart. However, a tragedy struck once again when Bighart passed away within hours. Determined to bring justice to his friend's death, Vaughan contacted the new sheriff of Osage County, revealing that he possessed vital information, including the identity of the killer. Promising to return with the evidence, Vaughan boarded the train back home. But fate had other plans. During the journey, Vaughan mysteriously disappeared from his cabin. A frantic search ensued, lasting 36 hours until his lifeless body was discovered near the railroad tracks just north of Oklahoma City. Like McBride before him, Vaughan had been stripped of his clothes and left to die, leaving the community in shock and mourning yet another loss. The events that unfolded in Osage County were filled with tragedy, betrayal, and a deep sense of injustice. The people yearned for answers and desperately hoped that someone would step forward to bring the perpetrators to justice. Did they know that the road to uncovering the truth would be paved with even more heartache and sacrifice? The death toll continues to rise, and even white Americans are now implicated in the reign of terror. It seems that whoever is responsible for these murders is untouchable and invincible due to the pervasive corruption in Oklahoma society. By the end of 1923, the Osage tribe is urging the federal government to send officials with no ties to the state. Molly lives in constant fear, knowing that she and her family are likely targets. And William Hale promises to avenge her family, but even he is vulnerable as his own pastures are set on fire and his cattle are killed. Molly retreats into her home, no longer socializing or attending church. Rumors spread that her mind is unraveling and her diabetes is worsening. The Shawn brothers are some of her only visitors, coming and going to inject her with insulin. Historical records are scarce, but in late 1925, Molly writes a letter to a local priest claiming that she is being poisoned and her life is in danger. Part 2 of the Osage murders has come to a close. Stay tuned for part 3, which will be uploaded shortly. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button to receive notifications when new content is posted. If you've read Killers of the Flower Moon, share your thoughts on the book and movie in the comments below. Until next time, take care of yourself.